All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to another edition of We Ain't Got No Histories Facebook Live, preseason live. I'm your host, David, and we'll be here as usual for about an hour as we digest today's performance, preseason fakery, whatever you want to call it. Absolute shenanigans from the refereeing crew and from some of the players. As Chelsea lose 2-1 to Inter Milan in Singapore. This is the final game of the preseason tour. It's the final official scheduled preseason match. Next weekend it's the Community Shield against Arsenal. And then it's time for the actual season itself. Whether we want to call the Community Shield friendly or not, I suppose will depend on whether we win or lose, right? It only matters if you win. And if you're Mourinho, you can even pretend that it's an actual trophy these days, which it clearly isn't, because you just get a plate if you want. If even just looking at it technically, but that's probably getting a little ahead of ourselves, and we probably would need a bit of a bit of improvement based on today's performance and some of what we saw against Bayern. Certainly not what we saw against Arsenal, because that was a very good performance. But since that weekend's game, Chelsea have gotten a bit more tired, a bit less concentrated. On the other hand, we did start a little better today than against Bayern, that's for sure. But we have to keep in mind that these are just friendlies. The results don't matter as much as the playing time and people learning the system. Somebody like Morata clearly needs more time to learn what's happening. Whether he's going to play left wing in the actual season, I am not so sure about that. As you can tell by the lighting changing in this room, the sun is finally coming up here on the west coast of the United States. It is now 7 a.m. So it's a good thing. Good thing this thing was at like 4:30 in the morning. Okay, I'm quite ready for these games to not start at 4:30. Morata, I would guess, isn't going to play left wing back too often, or left wing too often. But that's what he played today to just get some more minutes. Get his fitness levels up. That definitely needs to improve. Other players who need to improve their fitnesses are certainly Marcos Alonso, who's ran out of gas for the second time this week. So if there was any doubt that we need somebody to rotate or back him up, is right there. Alonso ran out of gas in like the 60th minute against Bayern, and he ran out of gas today almost immediately after halftime. He was substituted off in the 53rd minute for Rudiger, who was making his preseason debut. Did I stay awake for the whole time? No. Thanks for the question there, Juan. I got a few hours of sleep, so ready to go. Hooray for preseason games at 4:30. How much do you think we should pay for Alexandro? 60, 70, 100? Well, based on the last two games, no price is too small. As there's this reflection right into my face. This is perfect. Ugh. Uh-oh, I can't read that. Sorry there, Chemo. Yeah, so the left wing back situation, not exactly ideal right now, with Alonso short on fitness, and if depending on what others tell you, short on quality, and Victor Moses is decent at right wing back, less so at left wing back. I'll move over here. Do you think Morata should have been the Arrowhead today instead of Michi? Asked Tim. I think that's what we're going to see later in the season, but for right now, Batshuayi is actually, I think, playing pretty well as the as the center forward, lone center forward, and I'd like to see that continue for a while. He was probably again unlucky for the second time this preseason to have a perfectly good goal chalked off for offside. They possibly might have been flagging Victor Moses, who was also making a run for the ball, which was unnecessary from Moses. But Batshuayi, I think he's already tweeted that it's they still sting. I forget the name. I forget the word that he used. So Batshuayi well aware that he's been flagged twice offside incorrectly this on this tour of China and Singapore. But still, I thought it was a pretty good performance from him. And if we're just going based off the performances in the preseason, I'd expect Batshuayi to continue to play at center forward. Of course, we did pay 60, 70 million for Morata, and as soon as his fitness levels are up to standard, I think he's going to be playing. Or maybe we will switch to the 3-5-2, which more and more people seem to be expecting, possibly based on Batshuayi playing pretty well this preseason. And what we saw today with Morata shoehorned in as a left winger I don't think is anybody's idea of a good plan in an actual competitive game situation. So getting both Morata and Batshuayi onto the field at the same time might be a good thing for us, especially with Hazard injured for at least another month or month and a half. Get Fabregas out of the actual hard-working part of midfield and get him to a place where he can concentrate on creating chances for the front two. Do I seriously want to win the league? Well, I thought I don't think saying that Batshuayi played pretty well has any indication on whether I want Chelsea to win the league or not. You got to recognize a good performance when you see a good performance, and he's if nothing else, he's scoring goals. Today he got unlucky, but saying that we can't win the league with Batshuayi is I don't know. It's a bit harsh on somebody who's been one of our better players this preseason. Any news on Pedro? No, he's got a mask. He's out in training in London, and I think he should be back next week. Yeah, so in the second half, for about 25 minutes to go, Charlie Musonda and Jeremy Boga both came on. They replaced Morata and Willian, so then we were playing with a front three of Boga, Batshuayi, and Musonda. And that was it was exciting to see. I don't know, Boga I don't think had a too impressive of a game, but Musonda certainly looked hungry and injected a lot of pace and endeavor. And just enterprise. We looked with Morata and Willian, especially as the game wore on, we looked pretty sluggish and rather uninspired. Willian started the game well and had plenty of flicks, certainly, and even linked up with Moses, which was something that was lacking the last time out. But it was nice to see the young creative guys stepping up and getting minutes and showing pretty well. Musonda looks good, but also looks 12. Needs to bulk up. He looks at least 14, is what we decided. And we ain't got no histories Slack chat, so this sun is killing me. It was 96 Fahrenheit, says Chuck. Yeah, it was certainly, the conditions were not what we would get normally in England, but there's still relative performance levels and relative fitness levels, and I think, at least on the Chelsea side, Alonso looks not quite up to the level of everybody else. I mean, certainly, for example, Alonso has been substituted off twice this week against both Bayern and Inter, and Victor Moses has played 180 minutes on the two wingback sides. So, there's we can say it's hot or whatever, but certainly Moses is ahead of Alonso right now, just in terms of fitness, based on those substitution patterns. Yeah, and Musonda is always the thing. The knock against him has always been physicality. Again, he looks 12 or 14, even though he's supposedly 20 or 21. But I don't know, the way the Premier League's trending more and more is the old cliched arguments for physicality are slowly going out the window, and we're slowly getting the young or the little frail tricksy guys making big impacts. I mean, somebody like David Silva at Manchester City, certainly he's got that sneaky ankle biting quality about him. But it's hard to debate that David Silva hasn't been a great Premier League player. Somebody, Chuck, says Pedro has done fine. I mean, Pedro's like 5'2" on a good day. So, yeah. Yeah, Gabriel Jesus is one of the tiniest, most frail strikers I've seen in the Premier League, and he's just fine, as Brian points out. Of course, there's somebody like Cuadrado, but Cuadrado is not a small guy, right? He just it just didn't work out for him. He fell over a lot. If Musonda stays on his feet and plays strong, somebody like Hazard, who has 5'6", 5'7", but plays a strong game, strong base, something like that. And I think Musonda will be fine if he gets his opportunities, and he certainly looked decent enough out there today. Finally, making his debut after all these injuries this preseason. We rely on Hazard's magic every time. Yeah, if there is a concerning thing from today in terms of the attack was with Morata, Batshuayi, and Willian as our front three, we really seem to be lacking some creativity and some I don't know, penetration, I guess is the word. But Willian's tricks and flicks weren't really coming off, and his idea of a creative attack seems to be about the same thing every time. The quick flick to the right that even somebody like Chalva made fun of last season. So I kind of want to know what you get out of Willian. We didn't have the invention of Hazard, and on the left wing, obviously can't really expect Morata to play like Hazard. So I think the move was mostly just to get Morata minutes and fitness and all that stuff. One says we are lacking motivation. I'm not sure we really lacked motivation. Although the one thing I definitely didn't like was when the referee blew for that what he said was a penalty kick, and nobody in the world thought was a penalty kick. Not even Jovetic, who was supposedly fouled but fell over. Really, when that penalty was taken, the Chelsea players were just standing around the penalty box, waiting for that penalty to be taken. And when Courtois saved it, nobody was there to even put pressure on the Inter players to clear the ball or make it tough for them to score on the rebound. I don't look bait. Sorry, it's since I started the video, the sun has come up, and there's a window right here, and it's reflecting off the window. So yeah. It's rather unfortunate. It's making my face look really red, and that's not cool, but I mean, what do you expect? This is Facebook Live with We Ain't Got No History. These production values are through the roof here. We're as good as the refereeing crew today. Yeah, and it's also not helping that I got up at like 4 a.m. But enough about me. The point is Chelsea. Come on. Anyway, what I didn't like was everybody just standing around as the penalty was taken, and Courtois saves the penalty here. There's a rebound, and there are like 5 or 6 Inter players who could have scored that rebound without anybody in a white shirt around. So if we're looking at effort or motivation, that's a good indication right there that Chelsea had given up, at least on that play in that one moment, because everybody was upset that the referee gave that penalty, which was never a penalty. And then, whatever. I mean, we looked motivated enough in the second half, certainly push for an equalizer, which is partly why Inter managed to score a second goal when they carved us apart on the counter multiple times. It's kind of what happens when you push numbers forward and you get exposed at the back. Good to see. I don't know. I wasn't too impressed with Courtois on the second goal. I thought it was certainly savable from a tight angle. It looks like you watched the game just after arriving home late from a nightclub, says Rodrigo. Well, I assure you, my night was nowhere that exciting. So, I thought Courtois could have done a little better on the second goal, but he made several decent saves, possibly excellent saves. So, it is what it is. What players do you think need to sign to make the team stronger? We need Fellaini now. Not Fellaini. Whatever we do, not Fellaini. Well, I think what we've learned from the last 2 games is underlining the fact that we need more numbers for rotation, that Conte can trust. Right now our midfield options beyond Conte and Fabregas are Kyle Scott and Mario Pasalic. I'm assuming that's not going to be the case going forward in the season. Pasalic has been linked to a loan to Spartak Moscow. I haven't heard much about Kyle Scott's future, but I'm assuming it's not going to be the backup to Cesc Fabregas for Chelsea this season. Bakayoko coming back from injury. Eventually, he might be back in a couple of weeks, so we'll see. Will certainly help. But we need numbers in midfield, and we obviously need numbers at wingback, where preseason or no preseason, 96 degrees and 96% humidity aside, Alonso and Moses can't be expected to play 2 games a week at a high level. Even if you're one of those who actually believes that Moses and Alonso can play at a high level, which they can, which we've seen, despite all the naysayers, we need somebody to deputize for them. Even if it's not a 1-to-1 rotation, even if there are weeks when they play both games, but with a busy schedule, with Champions League games, with League Cup and all that, taking up all the midweeks basically this season, it's we need somebody other than Kennedy or Christian Cuevas or Fikayo Tomori, who are the 3 players who've played backup wingback this preseason. So, tack on another 20 million to Alexandro and get it done, or whatever needs to happen. I'm not sure. I'm not actually convinced that it's that what's holding up that transfer is the actual money part. I think it's Sandro himself who's not necessarily convinced that he wants to leave. So whatever we need to do to throw into that deal to make him actually want to leave Juventus, needs to happen. Houses, cars, whatever it needs to do. Is Baba Rahman still a possible choice? Unfortunately, Kelvin, Baba Rahman won't be an actual choice, a reliable, possible choice even, until at least January. I've seen a couple reports that say he'll be back by October, but as we saw with Zuma, just because you're back in training and you know fit to play or whatever isn't going to make you ready to play. This is assuming that Baba Rahman is Chelsea quality, which you know I'm not so sure is 100% assumable. But he had the ACL injury at the end of January, had surgery on it in February or start of February, end of January, and it's at least a 6 to 9 month recovery process. If he's back by October, then he's right on 9 months, which is pretty typical. But ACLs can take up to 2 years for you to fully recover from. It's one of the reasons we loaned out Zuma this season. Is he came back halfway through last season, but wasn't up to his previous standard. He needs minutes to recover his previous abilities. What season jersey are you wearing? I believe this is the 2010, 2011. After Ancelotti's title. I believe this is the away or the third kit. The black with the orange stripes with David Luiz on the back. Long sleeve, of course. 09-10. Yeah, it's one of those seasons. Well, it's got the gold patch, so I mean it's always confusing me. It's a classic. We should play a midfield of Bakayoko, Conte, Cesc with a 4-man defense. Yeah, I don't think we're switching away from a 3-man defense just yet. If we're switching, although not saying that midfield won't work, but it would work with a 3-5-2. So having the usual back three and then a midfield base of Conte and Bakayoko, and then Fabregas ahead of them or behind them in like a Pirlo type of role. That would be a 3-5-2 then with either Morata or Batshuayi up top, or some configuration like Morata and Hazard when he's back. A big small, strong small, big fast combination. I think that's certainly something that we could work on. And whether we are working on it or not is unclear. But there were some reports this week that they were trying something new. We certainly didn't really see anything new in today's game. It was 3-4-3 all the way with Morata on there or without Morata. So, I'm sure the injuries to Hazard and Bakayoko aren't really are not ideal for our preseason preparations. Hazard knows the system, but he knows the 3-4-3 system. So if we're trying something new, then he's not going to know that system. And Bakayoko is a long way. He needs to get into the actual just the basic Conte boot camp first before he can be counted on to be a contributing factor. Willian divides the opinion like no other. Well, yes, he's just continuing that old Mikel tradition of, is he good or is he terrible? Do we need another striker after today? I think we need another striker if we are seriously actually considering playing a 2-striker system. I am not entirely convinced that we are. I think Morata and Batshuayi both played today just to get minutes for both of them. That's not saying that we shouldn't sign somebody to be a third striker. We could certainly use like a Llorente, unless he's 30 million. A decent veteran striker could do wonders, I think, just to push both those players. But the bigger priority should be wingback, and we should be going all out to try to get at least one wingback, if not two. Somebody like Tolian, who could play both sides. Somebody like Sandro, who could instantly upgrade that side. Even if you think Alonso's good, Alexandro's pretty great. So that's what we should be doing. Yeah, Loic Remy as the backup striker. I mean, there you go. In-house option that doesn't really cost you anything. Remy was linked with some random move to some random place, not at Chelsea. But we can forego that 5 to 6 million transfer fee and keep him as a third striker, and for the League Cup games against the League Two sides. There you go. Good old Loic Remy. Joe says, frustrating to watch Moses stacking on the right. No matter how many times he gets the ball cleanly, he seems incapable of crossing and crossing. He's like second half of the season. Yeah. Well, I was more concerned. I'm not too concerned about Moses's crossing ability. I was more concerned about him being simply unable to beat his man today. And that kind of happened against Bayern too. So it's he's. I'd say Moses's first and foremost role is to beat his man, drive the baseline, and then put a low cross in or cut the ball back. And he's not really doing that. He was doing that at the very start of his career as a right wing back, and then he slowly faded out from that. And he's sadly kind of continued that pattern this preseason. I'm not. With two strikers, we probably should be playing a bit more to high crosses as well, but it remains something that we don't really do. And if we do cross if we go for that sort of cross, it's usually from a bit deeper, from somebody like Azpilicueta. Seen him put in a few crosses from his right center back position. So maybe, I'm not sure. Yeah, preseason means nothing, says Joe. It's true, and the results certainly don't mean anything. There was supposedly an actual trophy on the line here because it's the International Champions Cup, so there's an actual cup to be awarded. And I guess Inter got it, so good for them. And the same thing for next weekend when there's a plate to be awarded. But where I think preseason does matter a little bit is just in individual performances, fitness levels, that sort of stuff. You can't completely ignore it. We tried that 2 years ago to completely ignore preseason, and in retrospect, we should have seen the warning signs. So, since then, maybe we need to pay a bit more attention to how the players are doing. And that's not to say that they're playing too bad or whatever. And Conte, I think, definitely places more emphasis on the actual training part than the games. Just based on the fact that we only scheduled 3 preseason games and the one, scrimmage against Fulham a couple weeks ago behind closed doors. But in the meantime, we're doing double sessions and all that stuff. And with fewer games comes fewer travel, fewer time spent traveling, more training sessions. And since this season we have all the added games for the Champions League, we the Conte loses a lot of that training time that was so crucial last season to drill the players in the tactics and get the 3-4-3 up and running. Fortunately, this season we don't have to train all the players in it, but we do have to train all the newcomers, including somebody like Bakayoko, who really hasn't trained with Conte yet. Rudiger has a couple games in. He looked all right today, I thought. And he certainly seems a threat on set pieces, which is always a good thing to have. And that's something that he would provide an upgrade over, say, Azpilicueta. Or if he does replace Cahill, then he provides a similar threat as to Cahill in preseason. So you know, as far as the preseason results, I think last summer we were told that Conte's preseason results are never good, and last year our preseason results were okay-ish. So I'm not really worried about results or anything like that. Especially today, I mean, it's just the refereeing was an absolute joke. Uh, it's if somebody, I think Dan Levine was tweeting that if somebody does a highlights package of this game, they should be playing it to like Yakety Sax or something, and that's probably fairly accurate, considering Inter's first goal came from one of the more hilariously bad penalty calls you'll ever see. Their second goal was nice, it was a good counter, and then the third goal in the game was spectacular own goal from Kondogbia from about 40 yards, chipping his own goalkeeper. So it's that's preseason for you. Those are the things that don't really matter. But what matters is link up play and players showing understanding on the pitch, showing a bit of motivation, showing fitness levels, things like that. And there are certainly concerning things there, especially at wingback. What do you think of Azpilicueta at wingback and Rudiger at center back? So I'm not a huge fan of Azpilicueta at wingback, and I don't think that's his best position in this system. He's not. We were talking about earlier about Moses' role, and what the system requires of him is when he has the ball, he takes on his man, and he either beats him down the line to the baseline or to the goal line, and then puts a low cross or a cut back in, or what Moses also can do is cut inside onto his weaker foot and beat his man that way. But the main thing is taking your man on one and beating him. And I don't really see that Azpilicueta doing that with any consistency. Now, as we said, Moses has been struggling with this, and that's not ideal because that's what he needs to be doing. But Azpilicueta as a defensive option is fine. So if we are looking to close out games, for example, and we're already leading, then he comes on for Moses, for example, or switches to right wing back to provide another defensive option there, and that's perfect. If we're relying on him to be the width in our attack and create for the strikers, then I think that's not the ideal plan. So as to where to fit Rudiger in, I'd like to see him try it at least instead of Cahill. I know Cahill is the captain, and he's solid and all that stuff. But I'd like to see a defensive three of Rudiger, David Luiz, and Azpilicueta in a game that counts. And that's my assumption is if there's a player, the first player out of the current back three would be Cahill. David Luiz seems kind of irreplaceable, and Azpilicueta adds a lot into that setup by being comfortable on the ball and being able to carry forward. He's not going to be beating his man one-on-one, but he is very crucial in the build-up and stepping up into midfield and providing another option there. I think Conte called Azpilicueta one of the best at that position last season, and other than possibly getting beat on a couple headers, he's been basically perfect since switching to that role. There were a couple issues with his positioning today, including on that counter from which they scored, but it's preseason. I think he'll be fine. So it's a long-winded way of saying again that I'd like to see Rudiger, David Luiz, and Azpilicueta once everybody's up to speed and knows the system. But we'll see. Joe says Conte is very inflexible in his approach. It's basically 3-4-3 or nothing. I like to think that he's actually uh, very flexible, but he believes in the system, or he continues to believe in the system, and I'm not sure why he shouldn't at this point, or at this moment. We saw last season that he's willing to try new things, and he's not afraid to change it up once it's obvious that something isn't working, and that's how we arrived at the 3-4-3 in the first place, right? We started that season. We played most of that preseason in a 4-2-4, and there was one, I think, against AC Milan last season. We played a 4-3-3 or something like that, and then we started the season itself in a 4-3-3. If you recall, we had Oscar playing in midfield. We had a midfield three of Conte, Matic, and Oscar. And Oscar looked like great for one game, which tends to be Oscar's career summed up in Chelsea. And then when the 4-3-3 kind of petered out, we kept switching back to a 4-2-4 in the cup games. But when that happened, when that kept giving up goals, that's when we switched to the 3-4-3. Given its success, it's he's not gonna rip that up as quickly as he ripped up the 4-2-4. So we might see small tweaks before we see massive changes again. So that's why 3-5-2 is something to keep in mind, especially if we keep both Morata and Batshuayi, because that could be an interesting combination at the top there. Our keeper always stand out of position. In our last match, 2 goals were his fault. Yeah, like I said, I think Courtois could have done a little better on the second goal. Other people have told me that's a little harsh, because it was strong low shot right at in a place where it's kind of tough to save it. It's tough to get down that quickly, and tough to move your feet. I don't know. I don't know enough about goalkeeper positioning to criticize or not criticize. There was one shot against Bayern, one goal that he possibly could have saved, the first one, but I think he was moving in the direction of the play, and nobody was really expecting Rafinha to take that shot. So it is what it is. I think Courtois came up with several big saves today to keep the score close, and he also saved the penalty but got unlucky on the rebound. Zero creativity with Hazard. Yeah, that one probably a more valid criticism of Chelsea's performance today, and I don't know, that's something we gotta work on. You have to get away from having to rely on Hazard for a moment of magic, and whether that's through set plays or what Hazard called automatisms or something like that. Basically scripted plays that Conte likes to work on. We've seen the prime example that we see of that is in build up when he does like the 1-2 pass or the wall pass with the wing back over the top of the defense for the striker or the forward to run on. Things like that. Crafted plays, scripted plays, whatever. We haven't seen those too much in preseason, so I'm not sure why. If we're holding those for the real season, or it's certainly we need another plan than Hazard. I'm a bit scared that Willian is their only senior attacking midfielder at the moment, and I think that's certainly not helping the situation at the moment. Hazard and Pedro are 2 different players, but they both are able to create something impactful, so to speak, on the scoreboard. And even though Willian scored like 12 goals, which was a career high last season, he's not somebody you immediately think of influencing the game in a direct manner like that. So that's a concern. Pedro's going to be back and hopefully not scared after getting knocked out and punched out by the goalkeeper. And then hopefully Hazard won't be too affected by his broken ankle. And recovering from a broken bone is usually pretty straightforward, but a lot of it is mental. Being able to trust that bone has healed and using it as if nothing happened. That takes a bit of mental recovery. So hopefully that will be all fine. Michi has improved, but I don't think he's up for it yet, or if he'll ever be. Oh man, writing off Michi Batshuayi. We'll see how Tammy will develop next season. Yeah, I don't know. I think it might be a little too early to write off Michi Batshuayi. He's certainly improved, and it's certainly showing on the pitch. So, yeah. But that's not to say that we're not excited about old Tammy Abraham, because if he can develop into what he's promising to develop into, then we'll be set for a good while. Either through Abraham and Morata, or Abraham, Morata, and Batshuayi. If we are considering a 2-striker system for the future, having 3 quality strikers to rely on is ideal. So if they can be all work together, I mean, Morata's 24, Batshuayi's 24, 23 or 24, and Abraham is still only like 19 or 20. So it's a promising situation to build a core that Conte was talking about before the game. Comparing the Chelsea squad to somebody like Bayern, he was saying that Bayern have like 17 or 18 core players on whom they can build, and then they can each year kind of bring in 2 or 3 new signings and add to that. Well, Chelsea right now, certainly last season, there were about 13 players that Conte trusted, and we're losing 2 of those in Costa and Matic, and replacing them with Morata and Bakayoko, and then adding Rudiger possibly. So we're up to now 14 players that Conte is willing to trust on a regular basis. So we need several more signings, 3 or 4, which incidentally does match the supposed rumors, or the rumors from last week, that Chelsea are looking at 3 or 4 more players. We'll see. What do I think about Musonda? I think Charlie Musonda had a pretty good showing for his first appearance in preseason. I was quite impressed by his drive and his speed. I guess it's been a while since I've seen him really, and I don't recall him being that quick. But he's somebody I'd like to see more of. Let's put it that way. Of course, we're now out of preseason games. Oh. Yeah. Well, hopefully he'll continue to impress in training and actually stay with the team, which he did get shirt number 17, which should indicate that he's staying with the team. And if we're sticking with the 3-4-3, we shouldn't really be relying on Morata to be a left winger, and that's where somebody like Musonda can come in. So we'll see against somebody, for example, Community Shield coming up. I would assume we're going to go back to Pedro and Willian as our front 3, but then is that something we can rely on? Well, we'll see. Hazard isn't back for another month and a half, so hopefully there are chances and opportunities for somebody like Musonda, or possibly even Jeremy Boga. We'll see. Juan Garcia, what temperature is where I live? Oh, well, I'm in Northern California, and it's very hot around here. about daytime 100 plus Fahrenheit, which is not fun at all. Who starts, Batshuayi or Morata, is the big question. That is an excellent, excellent question. I don't know. I would hope. Well, I don't know. I guess I don't really know what I'm hoping for. Based on preseason so far, Batshuayi has to start. He started every game and he's played well. Morata doesn't quite look up to speed yet. So, there you go. If we're going just purely based off that, it has to be Batshuayi. If we're going off what the assumed plan is for the season, then it has to be Morata, and Batshuayi goes back to being a backup. And that's a bit harsh or whatever, but it is what it is. Right, as Ben says, you don't pay 70 million, sit on the bench, and that's the old Fernando Torres argument right there. We broke the club record in transfer fees for Morata. He has to start at least a few games. So it depends on. I would assume Morata definitely starts in 2 weeks against Burnley in the Premier League. It's probably a bit more up in the air for the Community Shield, even if we do consider it as a trophy, which we probably shouldn't because it's just a friendly. So yeah, that's where we're at. Batshuayi and Morata with Fabregas at CAM. Yes, that's the old 3-5-2, but we've yet to really see it in preseason, so I don't know. I wouldn't really bet on it happening just yet. I would guess the 3-5-2 right now is more of an in-game, late-game option. Looking, especially if we need more, midfield presence, bring on a third midfielder. And we saw this plenty of times last season, but now it might be a more formulated approach. So I think that's where we'll see the 3-5-2 for now. Media reckon Conte slating Morata already. Absolutely desperate for him to be Torres too. The media does love a narrative, right? And Spanish striker, 50 million plus, never quite proven at top level or whatever. I'm sure the media would enjoy laying into Morata and Conte, just as I'm sure they will enjoy if Lukaku gets off to a slow start at Manchester United. So I'm not. I guess I don't know. Conte didn't really do himself any favors with that kind of strange press conference that he conducted earlier this week. He called 4 or 5 journalists together who've been following the team in the preseason, and then he just kind of talked about how Harry Kane is the best striker and how Spurs have less pressure and things that are fairly obvious, mild takes, but have now been blown up into a starting narrative of Conte versus Pochettino, etc., etc. But that's the media for you. Gotta get some stories in. And now we have a dog barking. Yeah, that was a weird press conference by his standards. We went through last season with Conte basically doing the bare minimum as far as media engagement is needed. He did pre-match, post-match, and he had a couple media appearances with BT Sport for pre-game videos and things like that. But beyond that, it was very, very standard, very non-controversial, and that was it was fantastic. Really, kept them out of headlines. He kept saying all the right things. Work, fight, improve, respect this, respect that, whatever. And now we're in Singapore, and he suddenly calls a bunch of journalists together, takes them out to coffee, and starts talking random stuff about Spurs and Harry Kane and all this. It was just, I don't know. It was kind of, in youth development, a lot of talk about Chalobah this and Bakayoko that, and I don't know. Maybe he just wanted to get some things off his chest, I guess. I don't know. It was a bit weird in that sense. Maybe he's just more comfortable with English now, so this is the new style. Or who knows? Me just wanted to set a record straight. It's who knows? It was a bit strange. Maybe the heat's getting to him. Delman has seen an interview of Italy from him going ballistic. Yeah, there's a famous interview that pops up pretty regularly, about once a month, after Conte came back from his suspension for supposed match fixing, which he vehemently denies. He served like 6 months, a 6-month ban for that, and then once that was done, he held this fiery press conference, because being accused of match fixing is a pretty serious slap to his ego. Somebody who prides himself on winning and motivating. So if you haven't seen it, it's on YouTube, and if you just do a quick search, I'm sure you'll find it. It's helpfully subtitled in English. So that's the angry Conte that we don't normally see. I think the closest we've seen him be angry as a Chelsea manager was the 3-0 loss to Arsenal. When which proved to be the turning point of the season. So it will be a difficult season, and Conte knows it, says Robin. He has to absorb all the pressure now. Time will tell if he's here for the long run. I'd like there was the quotes the comments he gave in his actual pre-match press conference for this game yesterday. Talked a lot about building for the future. So I think, even though the contract that he signed didn't have additional years, I think he definitely is trying to build something for the future. He knows that the job of a Chelsea manager is pretty limited, or pretty short term, even in the best of times. But he seems to be definitely trying to build a new old guard, new guard of the team. And he talked a little bit about that with the core players, comparing to Bayern and all that. So I think those are good signs of him trying to be, or his intent being, here for the long run. And I haven't heard any actual official confirmation whether his family did eventually move to London, but that was supposed to be the plan. And they had a school picked out and everything for the daughter and things like that. So I think for now, we can rest assured that the plan is for Conte to stay as long as humanly possible. We probably don't have to win the league every year for him to stay, but we have to stay credible and improve in terms of absolute performance isn't the plan. Who knows? The average lifespan of a modern day football manager is not really more than 3 seasons, even in the best of times. So it's just how it is. The stability and the strategy at the club is set at board level, or the director level, with like Emanalo and those guys. So it's what it is. Rudiger or Christensen's, asked Joe. Well, I think Rudiger is ahead of Christensen at this point, and so that makes Christensen 5th choice. But I think that's the 5 defenders that we're going to roll with into the season, and there should be plenty of playing time for all 5. So I don't think anybody would be left out too long. Morata is not that special, says Cornelius. So he should have convinced Costa to stay. Maybe right, but that's not an option at this point. We spent the money on Morata. He's going to be the featured center forward that we're going to try, and Costa is on his way out, or whatever he's going to end up doing after he's done jet skiing with his dog in whatever Brazilian river. Robin says he's definitely trying to build a team. There's some reaction of the club from backing him in the transfer window, which is true. A couple of bad results, maybe it will start the usual roasting pressures. He must keep his cool, unlike Mourinho, who lost his head in 2015. Yeah, I'd say I'd agree with most of that. Chelsea definitely have shown a willingness to back him. We may have dragged our feet a little bit. Everybody expected things to happen in June. They didn't really, but now in July, we signed Morata, who supposedly has been Conte's target for at least a couple of years. We signed Bakayoko, who seems to be a good signing, and Rudiger, who's been a Chelsea target for a while. We added 2 new staff members for Conte, the video analyst and a new assistant, this Paolo Vanoli, and gave him a fat new contract with a club record wages. So I think as far as backing the manager, I think we're doing the right thing. He needs more players, and he'll probably get a few more players, and hopefully that will be enough. I feel for Matic more than Costa, says Rodrigo. Matic was really underrated last season. He gave us balance. Yeah, I'd agree with that. I'd agree certainly with Matic being underrated. But I think the way I read that situation is, I think Matic himself wants to leave. I don't think it's got anything to do with us pushing him out. We're probably pushing Costa out, and we've made that decision way back in January, and now we're definitely following through on that. I think Matic is a decision that the player himself has made, and that's why he's kind of with the team, or he's back for preseason, but he's training by himself. We're not thinking of him as like as a bad seed or somebody who's going to cause discord like Acosta, but I think he's heading for the exit. I would be surprised if Matic stayed at this point. I think we're just trying to figure out how much money we can get and out of whom for him, and whether we have to sell to United or we can work a deal with some team in Italy. Yeah, I think writing Morata off after two appearances is far too soon. He might not have the snarl or the unpredictability of Costa, but that's probably a good thing as far as Conte is concerned. So I'm sure Morata will come good. We have to be. We spent so much money on him. We hitched our wagon to his star. So that's the plan we've decided, and that's the plan we have to follow through. Did Matic decide to leave because of Bakayoko? Maybe. I mean, I don't know about the timing, but we do know that Matic wanted to leave last summer, and he was convinced to stay by Conte. And if those feelings possibly persisted, possibly not, maybe he heard of Chelsea's potential interest in Bakayoko kind of pushed him. Maybe it didn't. I mean, professionals at this level have to know that there is competition. Like there's an interview with Alonso, or somebody asked Marcus Alonso, it's like, do you see yourself competing with Alexandro if he comes? Like, what is Alonso gonna say? Like, oh no, Alexandro's here, I'm going to have to retire now. No, he's going to say, no, of course I back myself. It's a professional player with many years of top-level experience. Of course I'm going to back myself. I think I can do it. I would expect Matic to say something similar or think similar if presented with a challenge of a Bakayoko. So I think that decision possibly was made before any of that happened. And but maybe we'll convince him to stay. And if we end up with a midfield four of Conte, Bakayoko, Fabregas, and Matic, that's pretty great. Unfortunately, don't think that's gonna happen. More dog barking. All right. Well, it's been about an hour of preseason shenanigans. I think we're gonna call it a day and get on with the rest of our day, considering it's now 8 a.m. bright and early. Go back to sleep or something. So Chelsea lose to finish out the preseason here in Singapore, 2-1 to Inter. Inter score all 3 goals. If you see a highlight, go watch Kondogbia's own goal, which is pretty spectacular. Jovetic and Perisic are the 2 goal scorers for Inter. For Chelsea, next up will be a trip back home to London, and then the Community Shield next weekend against Arsenal, which is sort of counts, sort of doesn't count. And then it'll be the season. I don't know. It's getting exciting, and we need to get a move on with some of our transfer business now that the season's around the corner, and it's not ideal to wait until transfer deadline day, especially with glaring holes at backup wing back, especially should be our priority. So we will probably talk to you after the Community Shield, unless something amazing happens midweek, which may be something like sign Alexandro. That would be alright. That would probably warrant an extra video. But unless that happens, we'll chat with you next weekend. Thanks for watching. Have a good day.